So I just had a custom order come through from Jacob. He's made some really cool choices with this PC. Really looking forward to putting it together. I think there's only one mistake that he's made, and I'll reveal that to you later.
Now, rather than just be gratuitous and show off a build, I want to give you a bit of value. I want to explain the choices I'm making. I want to explain the little tips and tricks along the way. So stick with this build and you'll get just that. Starting on an AMD B650 platform. Pretty nice for any sort of gaming. Now you'll see here I'm going to slot in that SSD first. It's always the first thing I do with a PC is get the SSD into that motherboard. Now some of you might make a valid point and go, if this is our main SSD, why didn't you put it in that top slot there? There's a couple of good reasons actually. So putting it in the lower slot here, when you have your graphics card installed, it's going to be behind it. That's then going to leave your top slot free so that if you want to upgrade that SSD in the future, you don't have to take out your graphics card. Secondly, this top slot is PCIe Gen 5 enabled and we're using a Gen 4 SSD. So it also means that the Gen 5 slot is available should they want to put a PCIe Gen 5 drive in there. Of course, the trade-off here is that these lower slots don't have built-in heat sinks available, so the temperatures on these drives are going to be slightly higher. However, overall, I think this is the better way to do it. The drive temperatures don't get so high that they're going to cause major issues, so the trade-off here is okay. But it wouldn't be wrong to put this one in the main slot either, depending on what you want. As it stands, the SSD underneath the heatsink at the moment is just our test SSD that we use to do all of our benchmarking on. Now I'm keeping these tips coming thick and fast, guys. When you put your RAM in, start at an angle like this and then push it in. It's going to be a lot easier. Don't forget that the sort of nicer looking side of the RAM usually is going to face out to the right because that's what's going to be visible inside your build. Then we're going to release the latch on the CPU. I like to get everything ready before doing this because obviously those pins are quite fragile. If you break those, you're in big trouble. Just gently pop that CPU in, and I like to give it a small wiggle at the end just to make sure that it's definitely in the right place. But you want to be really gentle with these. And with the little cap that comes on top of the CPU cover, don't throw that away when you're done. Keep it, because if you need to return the motherboard for RMA, you're going to need that cap. Now, whenever using a CPU cooler, I like to mount it to the motherboard before putting it in the case. And in order to make sure that you're doing it right, you want to sort of mime where it's going to go in your case. You see I'm holding it up here with the tubes on the right. That's the normal orientation. You could put it around this way with the tubes on the left, but the logo on the Thermalright pump head when it's lit up is going to be the wrong way round. So let's stick to the pipes on the right. Never forget to take the plastic film off the bottom plate here. For your thermal paste, guys, it's really not that hard. It's just a garden peas amount in the middle. That's fine. If you put a bit more, a bit less, it really isn't going to matter that much. With these hook style CPU coolers, you want to put the bottom hook over first and then put the top hook over, but don't tighten them until both hooks are over. And then obviously with any sort of cooler, really anything in your PC that's got more than one screw, you want to try and tighten each side a little bit at a time rather than doing all one side down in one go. Now whip our case out of the box, just tip it upside down, guys. That's the easiest way to get it out, and then take the foam off. And there you go. You want to shell everything, take all the panels off so it makes it easier, undo all the little twist ties that come on the back of the case as well. And even if you've got a modular power supply, let's just hook that up. I just want to freeze frame there because you might notice that I did something that might look a little bit rogue. So I pulled apart these two cables, you see that? That is something you can do with PC cables because it's not going to break them. They're only just very lightly glued together when they're like this. So yeah, absolutely, pull those apart, make it slightly easier for you to get where you need. You can do this with other cables in your case as well, including the sort of front panel buttons, power button, HDD, LED, etc. Those can usually be teased apart. When it comes to connecting cables, and especially cable extensions, it's sometimes easier just to lead with one side into the extension a little bit first, but you will need to squeeze both ends a little bit to get that in place. I like to mount my power supply sort of towards the start of the build. That makes things a bit easier later. You can pre-route some of your cables. Like I'm doing here, I'm going to take that CPU power cable, I'm going to route it through the top before I've even put the motherboard in the case. That means I've got plenty of slack. It's going to make it easier to install that cable later. We're going to put the motherboard assembly in the case like this with the liquid cooler also sort of floating nearby. Going to clear out any cables that are underneath the motherboard and you're going to line that up nicely. You want to make sure that this is nicely centered before fixing that screw in place because that's going to be the basis for all your other holes to line up properly. And And then with the space that you've got available, you can plug in that CPU power cable in the top corner and then hook up some of your other cables as well. These are really tricky to do, especially when you've got your liquid cooler radiator already installed. It's going to be a lot easier to do those right now. Then you're going to feed all those cables from the fans of the liquid cooler. You're going to feed those through the routing hole at the top now before you mount it. It's going to make things a lot easier later. Once you've got that all lined up really nicely, don't stand the PC up, keep it on its side, and that's going to be much easier for you to line up the holes of the radiator when you're screwing it in place. Start with opposite corners, and then once you've got your two corners in place, then the rest will just hold itself in place while you put the other screws in. This cooler comes with daisy chain cables, so we're going to hook those up. And with a bit of cable routing nous here, you can move some of the cables off to the right. You want to try and move as many of your cables off to the right and the top of the case as possible, because this bottom left part, as you'll see soon, gets really clogged up with cables. So the fewer cables you can have down there, the better. When you're putting your cable clips on your extension piece for the 24-pin plug, just put one on. You don't need any more than one, and putting more than one on is going to make things harder. So just put one on and save your time essentially. When it comes to the front panel buttons, if they come in separate pieces like this, don't bother with the HDD LED. It just blinks away, and it's not really very useful. If your case is like this one, it's got the hole above where the graphics card's going to be. That's a really good place to route this power cable through, so you can get it into your graphics card, have it looking nice and neat. And here you can see we're unboxing this 5070 Ti Palette Gaming Pro. Stick with the law of the cheapest model, guys. You don't need fancy graphics cards. The basic one is going to be just fine. As you'll see later, the temperatures are fine as well. And then you're just going to mount this in the case. You just line it up with that slot and click it in place. Now you're going to see me do something pretty good here. I'm going to, with my other hand, hold the corner of the graphics card up whilst I put that first screw in, and that's going to reduce the GPU sag, and you can actually get away without needing a sag bracket if you do it this way from time to time. When you're plugging in these 12-volt cables, guys, these guys super snug. You cannot have a gap in there. They've got to be really pushed in tight. It can actually cause a fire if you don't, so you've got to be careful. Now you can see here we're doing some cable management. You see how much of the cable management ends up in this middle sort of lower left part of the case, right in the center here on this one. This is where the bulkier cables are, so the more cables you can get out of this area, the better. You see how I've routed some cables right across the top and to the right. That's going to be way easier. Don't forget to take the film off the inside of your glass when you're nearly done, otherwise it's going to look a bit murky. And then if you're having trouble getting that back panel back on, use a bit of gravity, turn the case over, and then just do a bit of a push and slide on, and then it should be fine. You don't have to make your cable management perfect, guys, just good enough. And here we are. So one thing I've been quite keen to test a bit more is noise levels, because that's quite important to me. So I put this decibelometer 1 meter away from the case so we can measure. With the PC off, we've got a base floor of 33 decibels, and then 38 when the PC's at idle, and around 47 at 100% load. We'll share our thoughts on that later. In terms of the temperatures, looking pretty good here. Max temperature on the CPU is pretty high, but that's always going to happen with Ryzen's. The plateau temperature's bit better, and during gaming you're looking at more like 70°C from my experience. GPU temperature, awesome. That is absolutely fine. You don't really need those fancy GPUs. This is going to keep it plenty cool. You could get away with a little bit of overclocking here. Of course, the boards that come on these lower end versions of graphics cards, they're not going to be as overclocking friendly, but you can usually squeeze a little bit out of them if you really wanted to. Now, I was supposed to record this on my proper camera, but the footage got corrupted, so here we go. We're talking about the gaming performance, and starting with Apex Legends, 1440p resolution, maximum settings on everything, and we were hitting the 300 FPS cap, so you can't really do much better than that, can you? Getting into something like COD Warzone, which is much more demanding, especially when you're playing Verdansk mode, and we put the settings onto the normal preset. I didn't change any other settings, I just wanted to put it on normal so it's easy to reproduce, and our FPS was between 200 and 230 most of the time. I think if you tweak these settings a bit more, like I do when I play the game, you're probably going to get in excess of 240 FPS here, no problem. Particularly if you don't mind flicking DLSS on, you're easily going to get over that 240 FPS mark. And it was a really smooth experience overall. No hitches, no problems, just easy. When we came into Fortnite, that's 1440p, everything on the lowest settings except the draw distance, which we put to the maximum so that you can see the enemies from as far away as possible. And in that we were getting in excess of 400 FPS. So this is fantastic for you competitive players. That's the CPU doing all the heavy lifting really. But if you're making money from playing Fortnite competition, streaming, whatever, this is going to be a great PC for you.
We said at the start that Jacob made a really great spec, but perhaps there's one mistake in there, and that one mistake could be the graphics card. Depends on what you think. So you have the 5070 Ti in here. Pretty nice graphics card. I mean, it's fantastic, great for 1440p and 4K gaming. But don't forget, there's that Radeon RX 9070 XT available as well. And that's going to give you about the same performance for around £80 less. It's up to you what you think is more important here. If it's just raw performance, then that Radeon might be a better shout. But if you want ray tracing, then you know that Nvidia is going to be better at that. But otherwise, I can't really fault what he's chosen here. This is a fantastic spec. It's actually got a lot of longevity and other things built in. We use that 1000 watt power supply, which absolutely is overkill for this build, but it was only about £20 more than the 850, and this means that if he wants to upgrade to any graphics card in the future, he's going to have that ability to do so. He's also picked quite a nice large case, which is this Antec C3 ARGB, which is going to hold any components that he wants to put in it in the future as well. We're on the latest AM5 platform, which means there's probably one more generation of CPU upgrades available, and it also means that you're already on DDR5 memory, which is going to be the standard going forward. I think the acoustics on this build are okay, not amazing, not terrible. It's not going to be silent, guys. If you want a silent PC, this isn't the way to go about it. It's not the right design, but it's going to look really nice, and it's not excessively loud either, as you can see from our testing. There's zero coil whine on this graphics card whatsoever, and I think that's something that's changed a lot in recent years. There's been a lot less coil whine on the more recent graphics cards, which I'm all here for. But whilst we have put some money into the upgradability of this PC, we haven't wasted money where it's not needed. On the CPU side, we have the 7800X3D and not the latest 9800X3D, because that's a pretty chunky saving of about £100 for not too much less performance.
Okay, here I am once again, having made yet another error in this video. Oh, Jesus Christ. The whole point of this PC was that I put in a 7800X 3D CPU to save a bit of money, blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I did? I ended up picking the 9800X 3D off the shelf. So all of the results in this video, they're all to do with the 9800X 3D and not the 7800X 3D. So I had to swap that back into the PC after I realised. I rechecked the temperatures and made sure the performance was fine. I didn't do any more testing because at this point I was about ready to cry. Anyway, on with the rest of the video.
We also went for a B650 motherboard instead of a B850 or an X670 or an X870. The reason is that for most users, you don't need a fancy motherboard. Something sort of lower mid-range is going to cater for pretty much everybody out there. It's only those overclockers and enthusiasts that are going to use that additional power that you get from a higher end motherboard. And that is where I'm going to end the video today. And if you're wondering where I've been for the past few months, well, I've been on a world cruise with your mum. And guys, this is not the kind of cruise that lets you take photos, so don't ask. Okay, bye-bye.